The fog that sometimes gathers at the edge of a life rarely announces itself with thunder and lightning. It arrives on tiptoe, a faint tremor in the air, a whispered suggestion that something is not quite right. Most of us feel it first in the stomach, a small tug of unease that we dismiss as indigestion or fatigue. Yet, decades before modern brain scans began to light up with orange and red warning flares, a solitary Swiss doctor learned to listen to that tremor as if it were an oracle. In the winter of 1913, Carl Jung sat in a consultation room at the Berghölzli Hospital, watching candlelight flicker across the face of a man who smiled like an affectionate older cousin and spoke like a diplomat. The man was impeccably courteous, almost soothing. He asked after Jung's children, complimented the embroidery on his wife's Christmas tablecloth, and apologized for arriving 5 minutes late with a humility that seemed to glow. But Jung's pulse thudded with a slow reptilian dread. He had seen that glow before, just once on the face of a prisoner in solitary confinement, who the next morning had strangled his guard with a rosary. The sensation was not rational. It arrived as a primitive chill, the same chill a deer feels when the wind carries the scent of mountain lion. Jung tried to reason the feeling away. After all, the patient's complaints seemed ordinary. An ungrateful brother, 2 manipulative colleagues, a circle of friends who, he insisted, were plotting to undermine his engagement. The accusations were sprinkled with self-deprecating humor, even tenderness. And yet, as the hour unfolded, Jung noticed that every villain in the man's stories shared the same 3 traits: a sly charm, a habit of flattery, and a tendency to keep small secrets. Those traits were, Jung realized, identical to the patient's own most polished social graces. The candle flame wavered, and in its uncertain light, the courteous smile seemed to detach itself from the man's face and hover like a mask on a stick. That evening, Jung wrote in his journal, "He does not lie. He has simply replaced the world with a painted backdrop of his own unacknowledged features." The sentence felt melodramatic the moment it was penned, yet within 6 months, the patient's brother would indeed suffer a nervous collapse. 2 colleagues would be dismissed for embezzlement. They swore they never committed, and 3 intimate relationships would dissolve in acrimony, so corrosive that one former fiancé attempted suicide. Throughout it all, the patient remained serenely convinced of his own blamelessness. His letters, later preserved in a restricted archive, read like court depositions composed by an angel who cannot fathom why mortals keep bleeding. What Jung encountered that night was not ordinary self-deception, but something older and colder, a systematic exile of every dark impulse into the outer world, carried out with such unshakable certainty that reality itself bent to accommodate the verdict. He named the phenomenon shadow projection, yet the term feels puny beside the magnitude of its consequences. Imagine discovering that a neighbor's houseplants have begun twisting their stems toward your window at night, and you will have some sense of how reality rearranges itself around an unchecked projector. They do not merely misjudge, they summon evidence. A polite silence becomes proof of scheming. A missed phone call becomes evidence of betrayal. A stranger's glance becomes a coded threat. The projector's brain, modern imaging now confirms, lights up exactly as it does during full-blown hallucination. Neural filters reconfigure, pruning contradictory data the way a gardener clips away yellow leaves. The projector does not choose this. The brain does it for him automatically, the way lungs breathe. But the single mind is only the first domino. The real devastation begins when the distortion field expands. Have you ever felt the air in a room change because one person arrived late with a grievance clenched in their jaw? Multiply that sensation by months, by years, and you will understand how entire families, workplaces, and villages can be reorganized around one person's refusal to own their darkness. In 1954, a school teacher in rural Denmark was quietly dismissed after parents circulated stories, never quite proven, that she practiced witchcraft. The tales began with one father whose teenage daughter had confessed to stealing communion wine. Unable to bear his own shame, he was the church treasurer. He convinced himself the teacher had corrupted her. By the time the rumors reached Copenhagen newspapers, witnesses swore they had seen the teacher levitate above the potato fields, her eyes glowing like coals. The woman herself was bewildered. She had simply taught her pupils a few folk songs about midsummer. She moved to Canada, changed her name, and for the rest of her life startled at sudden shadows. The father, meanwhile, rose to deacon and died believing he had saved the parish from Satan. Jung watched variations of this drama repeat with the inevitability of tide. He began to catalogue the warning signs the way sailors once memorized cloud formations. First, the projector speaks of your inner life, with a certainty that exceeds even your own. They do not say, "It seems to me you might resent me." They say, "You resent me," the sentence falling like a guillotine. Second, every contradiction you offer is flipped and used as further proof. Deny resentment, and you are clearly repressing. Provide evidence of affection, and you are manipulative. Remain silent, and you are guilty. The game is rigged. The only winning move is to step away from the table before the stakes escalate. Third, the emotional temperature is always too high for the occasion. A forgotten coffee date becomes a Shakespearean betrayal. A misplaced stapler becomes evidence of a campaign to sabotage their promotion. The disproportion tells you that you are not dealing with the present moment, but with 1,000 accumulated ghosts. Fourth, the projector's life is a museum of grievances. Visit the galleries and you will notice the same 3 portraits in every room. The treacherous friend, the scheming colleague, the ungrateful child. The faces change, the frame remains identical. Listen long enough and you will hear the same adjectives: manipulative, selfish, cold, applied to a rotating cast. The projector is not describing people, they are describing rejected pieces of themselves, expelled like splinters and nailed to the wall. Finally, the projector recruits. It begins casually. A concerned coffee, a worried text. "Have you noticed how she never smiles anymore? I'm only thinking of her well-being." The concern looks like care. It feels like mildew spreading across bread. One by one, mutual friends begin to squint at you as if trying to see the horns. The projector insists are there. You find yourself narrating your own innocence to people who once trusted you without question. The exhaustion of that performance is part of the trap. When you tire and fall silent, your silence is filed as evidence. Jung sketched these 5 signs on an index card and taped it above his desk like a doctor posting contagion protocols. Yet even as he warned others, he discovered that recognition is only half the battle. The other half is speed. A projection field behaves like a forest fire. In the first minute, it is a dropped match. In the 5th, it is underbrush crackling. In the 10th, it is a crown fire leaping from treetop to treetop. Intervene early and you stamp out sparks. Wait too long and you must flee the forest entirely. But shadow projection is merely the first circle. Beneath it lies a deeper disorder, ego inflation, the conviction that one's small mortal self has become the vessel for cosmic significance. The inflated person does not simply deny their shadow, they eclipse it with supernova brilliance. They are no longer John the accountant. They are the truth-bearer, the chosen healer, the last honest man in a fallen city. The transformation can be dazzling. Meetings that once bored them now vibrate with hidden meaning. Casual listeners become disciples. In the early stages, the inflation masquerades as charisma. The voice deepens, gestures widen, stories take on epic cadences. The audience feels blessed to be near such certainty. Yet certainty is a jealous god. Question the prophet and you become the heretic. Offer an alternative map, and you are tempting the faithful with false idols. The inflated mind cannot tolerate ambiguity. It mistakes complexity for betrayal. Jung observed the phenomenon in patients convinced they were reincarnated saints. In revolutionaries, certain history had appointed them executioners of the old world. In spiritual teachers who began demanding sexual submission as a sacrament. The common thread was not arrogance in the ordinary sense, but a terrifying vacancy where doubt should have been. When the ego identifies with archetypes, those ancient river-deep patterns of human experience, it becomes like a child wearing a dragon mask who forgets the mask is cardboard. The danger is not the mask itself. It is the moment the child believes he can breathe fire. History's atrocities are crowded with such children, inquisitors, gauleters, purity commissioners, all convinced they were disinfecting the world. Even more insidious is the perfect persona, the immaculate mask worn so long it fuses to the skin. We all craft personas: cheerful colleague, competent parent, supportive friend. But most of us feel the itch where mask meets flesh. The persona-identified person has lost the itch. They glide through luncheons and parent-teacher conferences like a hologram, every response appropriate, every emotion proportioned. Compliments land on them like rain on marble. Criticism slides away equally untouched. Their perfection is not virtue, but anesthesia. Behind the mask, rejected fragments accumulate in darkness. Rage, lust, envy, pettiness, an entire zoo of impulses locked in a cage too small. One day, the lock breaks. A news anchor who never missed a teleprompter cue is arrested for embezzling charity funds. A youth pastor who quoted scripture flawlessly is discovered grooming teenagers. The headlines call it hypocrisy, but Jung knew it as the shadow's revenge. The more flawless the surface, the more catastrophic the eventual eruption. Archetypal possession. Jung's fourth circle of danger looks to the untrained eye like religious ecstasy or creative genius. The possessed individual speaks in voices not their own, eyes wide as if watching distant battles. They may quote texts they have never studied, compose music overnight, or preach sermons that leave congregations weeping. But something metallic hovers in the air, like the smell before lightning. Listen past the thunderous certainty, and you hear the absence of personal nuance. The possessed person does not say, "I think," or "I feel." They speak as the voice of history, the mother of sorrows, the eternal warrior. The content may be sublime, or it may be horrific. The danger lies in the erasure of the individual ego that normally mediates between cosmic forces and human limitation. When the ego abdicates, the archetype drives. And archetypes, Jung warned, contain both nectar and poison in the same chalice. The same archetype that inspired Joan of Arc to liberate France also inspired Torquemada to light pyres in the Plaza Mayor. The difference was not the archetype but the capacity of the human vessel to contain its fire. Finally, the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious enactment of ancient scripts with new actors. A woman marries 3 alcoholics in succession, each kinder than the last, until the final one sobers up, whereupon she leaves him for a gambler. A man builds 3 businesses to prosperity, then sabotages each at the brink of success. They are not unlucky. They are playwrights trapped inside their own tragedies, auditioning strangers to play roles scripted in childhood. The giveaway is the eerie familiarity of the plot. Twists. Listen to the woman describe her second husband's late-night absences, and you will swear you have heard the exact sentences before, perhaps in her accounts of her father. The repetition compulsion is not fate, but an unconscious magnetism that draws precisely those who can help reenact the original wound, always in the hope that this time the ending will change. It never does. Each repetition deepens the groove in the record until the needle has no choice but to follow the track. How, then, do we protect ourselves? Jung's answer was disarmingly simple: consciousness plus boundaries. Imagine you are walking through a vast museum at twilight. Each gallery contains a different psychological danger: the shadow projector howling accusations behind a curtain, the inflated prophet atop a marble pedestal, the perfect persona posing like a statue, the possessed oracle writhing on the floor, the repeater trapped in a looping film. Your protection is not to smash the exhibits, but to see them clearly and refuse to join their dramas. The projector accuses you of resentment. Note the temperature rising in your chest, then step back. The inflated sage invites you to kneel, smile politely, and keep both feet on the ground. The perfect host offers a mask that fits too smoothly. Thank them and keep your own face. The oracle commands you to march. Remember you have dinner plans. The repeater casts you as villain in their childhood tragedy. Decline the role. Practically, this translates into 6 concrete steps. First, trust the internal compass. When someone's depiction of you feels unrecognizable, as if you are being asked to wear clothes that do not fit, trust the discomfort. Second, do not argue. The projector's courtroom is rigged. Evidence becomes ammunition. Third, ration information. The less raw material you provide, the less can be twisted into accusation. Fourth, keep records. Memory is the first casualty of projection. A dated email thread can be a life raft. Fifth, consult outsiders. A single conversation with someone outside the distortion field can restore sanity faster than months of internal debate. Sixth, when the fire grows too hot, walk away. There is no dishonor in strategic retreat. Jung himself, after years of attempting to treat a particularly virulent projector, finally closed his practice door with the gentle words, "I believe we have reached the limits of what analysis can accomplish." The patient raged, then found another therapist, then another, leaving a trail of burned bridges across 3 countries. Yet, protection is only half the journey. The other half is vigilance toward our own shadows. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one howling accusations, but the one who believes himself immune. Jung kept a small, cracked mirror on his desk. When patients insisted they had no shadow, he would silently turn the mirror toward them and wait. Eventually they would glimpse the crack, the distortion, the hairline fracture where light slipped through. The crack was enough. Once seen, the shadow could no longer swell unnoticed. Integration, not perfection, became the goal. The shadow was not to be destroyed, but acknowledged, given a seat at the table, allowed to speak its piece. In that dialogue, the compulsions loosened, the projections shrank, the archetypes receded to symbols on cave walls rather than puppeteers in the mind. Years after the 1913 consultation, Jung met the charming patient again by chance on a Zurich street. The man had aged. The courteous smile now looked stretched, brittle. He spoke of new betrayals, an ungrateful son, a thieving business partner, a faithless lover. Jung listened, nodded, and excused himself. As he walked away, he felt neither anger nor pity, only a quiet recognition. The man had become a living museum of his own unacknowledged darkness, forever curating exhibits of other people's sins. Jung stepped into the afternoon light, breathing the crisp air as if it were the first clean lungful after a long descent into mines. Somewhere behind him, the patient continued down the street, still gathering evidence, still polishing the portraits of enemies he carried like lanterns in the dark. And so the warning passes to us. When the subtle chill creeps up your spine in the presence of absolute certainty, when the stories about others feel too symmetrical, too tidy, too rehearsed, pause. Step back. Light a candle in the quiet of your own room and ask the ancient question, What in me is being mirrored here? The answer may not come in words. It may arrive as a sudden memory, a flush of shame, a dream of a stranger wearing your face. However it comes, welcome it. That moment of recognition is the crack in the mask, the first breath of freedom from the most dangerous force in human relationships, the refusal to see oneself whole. In the end, Jung did not map the underworld to frighten us, but to offer a lantern. The path is not straight, and the footing is treacherous, but the light is steady. Carry it forward, and when you meet those who insist the darkness is entirely outside them, tip your hat, keep walking, and remember the most terrifying thing is, indeed, to accept oneself completely. But it is also the most liberating.